All right. Hello. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Josh. Thank you for joining us for this afternoon's webinar, COVID-19 HR Guidance and Best Practices. We've got a packed hour for you. We're going to get started promptly at the top of the hour. What I'd like to do now, for those that are already with us, if we could do a quick tech check. If you could, in the chat box, just let me know if you can hear me clear, and if you can see the visual, it's the title slide, then I would appreciate it. Fantastic. Wow. Yeah, hundreds of you seem to be okay. Lisa, thank you. Annie, Chris, Julie, Kimberly, thank you. Timothy. And it looks like all of these are good. Yep. Seems like we are good to go with the technology. Okay, we're about a minute out. We're going to wait 45 seconds or so, and we will get started promptly at the top of the hour. And we do have a couple questions as far as being muted. This is a broadcast. We welcome chat and Q&A, but as far as audio communication back and forth, the attendees are muted for this to facilitate a large audience. Thank you, Rhonda. Just got a question. This will be recorded, and we will provide the recording link as well as the slides after the webinar. Okay, it is the top of the hour. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for choosing to spend a part of your day with us here. We've got a packed hour for you with a great presentation covering several points around the COVID-19 from an HR guidance and best practices perspective. We've got Kara Govro, an expert in this area, that will get kicked off with the content very soon here. As far as some Webinar 101, we've covered a few of those points already, but we do welcome questions. Please use the question or the Q&A box. We've got a very large audience with us today. We will do our best to address some questions as they come. We will be taking all of the questions and putting them together in an asset with answers, and we will make that asset available in the coming days. We are going to have a couple polls here to get kicked off. We appreciate your participation with these polls. In fact, let's go ahead and dive right into the first one, and then we'll get into the content of today's webinar. So the first poll here, which of these top your list in terms of concerns regarding COVID-19? These will be much more from an HR perspective. Let me activate this poll. Okay. If you could indicate which of these, it's single select, which of these tops your list as far as your concerns surrounding the COVID-19 situation. Thank you. Thank you for your participation. We're at 30%. Let's try to get up to 50 or 60. There's 50. And we'll try to hit 70, 75. Okay. 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Fantastic. 75%. Okay, let's take a look at these. We'll share these results. Okay, it looks like understanding the new legislation is tops for today. Well, you're in the right place. We're going to spend a significant amount of time on that today, and Kara has certainly spent endless hours researching that and has that as a big part of this presentation. And then, of course, managing employees through uncertainty, ensuring a healthy workplace, adapting to new employment structures, all concerns to some degree that I'm sure we're sharing here today. But thank you for your participation in that. We're going to do one more poll before I kick it over to Kara. All right, poll question number 2. Which actions have you taken in response to COVID-19? So this is multi-select. You can choose more than one. I know these are not fun things to think about, but it also can give us an idea of where everybody is. We're all experiencing some of these tough times and tough decisions together, but just indicate which of these you've already had to take action on: reducing hours, layoffs, closing your business entirely. A lot of people are facing that. And then no actions yet, just learning about the options. So we're at 60%. We'll give it 5 more seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All righty, 70%. Thank you so much for your participation in that. Let me share these results with you. So this relatively is, I guess, a positive response. If no actions, you're just trying to learn. Obviously, we're all facing challenges. We certainly have heard of businesses, and there's several represented here that have already had to take action that's just not really fun or pleasant to think about. So no actions yet. It's the first one. Reducing hours, very common, it looks like here, almost 40%. Layoffs, unfortunately, about a fifth. And then closing business entirely. So that just gives us an idea of where we all are today. You keep hearing we're in this together. We're all facing some very tough situations, but we appreciate you participating in that poll. And at this point, we're going to start talking about these situations, and our goal is to provide guidance and to be a source of clarity for you on things that for most people are very unclear right now. So that's why we have Kara here. Kara is an attorney. She's a compliance expert. Like I said, she's been all things COVID-19 and COVID-19 legislation and CDC and everything for the past couple of weeks. So I'm going to turn it over to Kara, and it's all yours, Kara. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm glad you're here with us today. We've got a lot to talk about. We know this is a really sort of dark time for employers and all of us individually as well. There are a lot of questions you're grappling with, pay questions, leave questions, safety questions, morale questions, will we be in business 3 months from now types of questions. And a lot of the answers are not easy. In fact, most of the answers aren't easy and will require some individualized decision making between owners and executives and HR people to figure out what's best for your business individually. But some of this we can get clarity on, so we will leap into those things now. First up, I've got current guidance from the CDC. I know a lot of you are in states where you've already got shelter-in-place orders, so this is going to seem pretty redundant because you've already reached the point where everybody's been sent home, and safety measures like, do them at home, but they don't matter in the workplace. But a very large portion of the country is actually kind of business as normal right now. So I do think it's important to talk through some of the current guidance. The CDC is, in fact, updating guidance pretty much daily at this point. So if you are still operating, I would encourage you to find the interim guidance for businesses and employers on the internet. If you just Google that, it'll be the top hit. The CDC is updating that regularly, and they're even putting at the top of the page what they have updated on what dates. So, make that your sort of morning coffee review if you're still operating, to see what the CDC has sort of updated or suggested today. We obviously want to have employees washing their hands when they come in the door and probably when they leave at night, just to help them get home safely. And the CDC is also suggesting that you schedule regular hand washing reminders. So send an email out every hour or get on the intercom, tell employees it's time to get up from their workstation and go wash their hands. They're touching a lot of things that they're not thinking about, like their phone or their keys or, their mouth. And washing their hands won't prevent them from picking germs back up from that, particularly their phone. So Lysol wipe your phone, do that regularly, and wash your hands, and just realize that you're coming into contact with things that you're probably not even registering as our employees. Provide disinfecting wipes and schedule regular cleaning. So make this happen. If you don't have somebody you can assign it to, do it yourself. And the CDC has now provided a list of cleaning products that are known to kill this particular virus and how long they need to be in contact with the virus in order for it to be killed. So if you search COVID list N on the internet, that's going to get you a very long list of cleaning products and how long they need to be in contact with something in order to kill the virus. So that's useful information for the workplace and probably for your home as well. The CDC, this is new. In the last week or so, they've suggested increasing ventilation, and then in the last couple of days, they've specified that they mean with outside air. So if you can open windows at work or at home for that matter, that would be great. And crank the AC as long as you know it's pulling air from the outside. If it's just recirculating indoor air, that's not going to help at all. That might actually make things worse. Cancel travel if you haven't already. Adjust or postpone large meetings. Use video conferencing. If you absolutely have to have an in-person meeting, make sure you hold them in open spaces that are well ventilated with, 6 feet of space pretty much between all the chairs. And then eliminate shared food. So if you've got snacks in the kitchen, that could be a problem. That is a problem. Get rid of the scoops. Get rid of the food altogether. Don't trust someone to use the scoops, I'm saying. So in our office, we've got like a container of chips and containers of nuts with scoops in them. Don't trust people to do that. Just get rid of shared food for now. And on the topic of food and shared spaces, make sure you're wiping down microwave handles, fridge door handles. Those are among the frequently touched spaces that we want to watch out for. I've seen a couple people comment on getting an echo. Josh, if you're on the line and can mute yourself, that might help, but I doubt it. If you're listening on your computer, you might try muting yourself if there's a mute button. I'm just trying to problem solve here. I'm also hearing that the audio is choppy. I apologize. My internet appears to be good, but I am working from home as well. We will be sending a recording of this, and hopefully the audio will be crystal clear on that. So if you're struggling to hear me, you will get a copy, and everything should be clear on that one. We'll also send a copy of the deck, so or the PowerPoint slides, I should say, so you can see all of this again later. All right, as for public spaces, and this could be your workplace in general, or it could be anywhere that you invite the public into. So if you've got customers and clients, stagger their flow. If you're still letting the public into your business, do what you can to space them out, basically. I was at the grocery store yesterday, and they had put these green circles on the floor in front of the deli case that said, please stand here, to create sufficient distance between you and the next customer. It was kind of awesome and very weird. But, do what you can to ensure that people are creating social distance, and that should be 6 feet or more. If you can figure out how to do more business online, sell your things online, book things online, do it. Business may be slow right now. I suppose one of the silver linings of this whole thing is that we're going to learn to use some things that we didn't know how to use before, and we're going to get comfortable with some technologies and some policies and some systems that we weren't comfortable with in the past. So one of those may be selling our things online or booking our things online, having meetings online. I mean, we all might discover that working from home is really great and saves a lot of commuting time and gas and all the rest. So we'll see what comes of this. But if you can figure out how to do more business online now's a great time for that. Remove tables and chairs if you're open to the public to create that space again, and also encourage tap and pay if you can. If you've got, a checkout machine that can be programmed to let people use Apple Pay or any of the other things where they like wave their phone near it and it takes their money, those are great right now. It reduces the number of fingers that have to be on things. We'd also recommend providing disinfecting wipes and hand sanitizer around the facility and certainly at the door. I know those can be hard to come by right now, but I think that's a really important safety measure at the moment. All right, and then another question regarding just safety in general has been, can we take temperatures of employees or ask them about how they're feeling before they come into work in the morning? Somebody just chatted in that they opened the windows in their office. Fantastic. It's a great idea. Yes, the CDC suggests taking temperatures in a lot of places right now. And the EEOC, which is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that usually would be jumping down your throat for taking a temperature because it's a medical exam, which is not allowed, has loosened their opinion on that. So at this point in time, under the current circumstances, we can take temperatures and we can ask about employees' health sort of when they come in the morning. However, with respect to those questions in particular, we want to be reasonable and specific about COVID-19. So don't ask open-ended questions. Don't ask, do you have any disabilities? Don't ask, how are you feeling today? Do you have any pain? Ask specifically, are you experiencing any of the symptoms of COVID-19, such as shortness of breath, fever, coughing? And then if you want to find the slightly longer list of symptoms, you can ask about those too. Just don't get open-ended though, because we don't want to find about disabilities that aren't relevant to this and then sort of have that information that we shouldn't have. All right, we've answered probably 10,000 questions in the last 2 weeks specific to COVID-19, and the next set I'm going to address are sort of top hits. I know, again, that a lot of you are sort of already shut down, so these are irrelevant, but many of you are also still operating, so these questions are still important to answer. Sick employees, can we send them home? Yes, you absolutely can, and you should. FYI, as an employer, you can always send a sick employee home if you believe they're sick with something that's contagious. So, you know, even 3 months ago, if somebody came in sniffling and coughing and sneezing and being generally gross with the common cold, you could send them home. That's your prerogative as an employer. You don't want them infecting other people in the office. What you don't want to do is send somebody home because they've got a broken wrist that's, you know, in a cast and they're just fine, or because you found out they have social anxiety or something like that. But if an employee comes in with something that looks contagious, you can send them home. And so that's not any different for COVID-19. When they can come back to work should be up to their healthcare provider. So they should be talking to their doctor, quite possibly via video conference, about when it's safe for them to return. Keep in mind that that 14-day thing, that's about quarantine. So if someone may have been exposed, we think that 14 days is long enough to see if they're going to get sick. So sending them home for 14 days makes sense. If you send somebody home sick and they're better 5 days later, you don't need to make them wait 14 days. Their healthcare provider will probably say 24 to 48 hours, but again, let's leave that to the professionals. Can we ask for a note for them to return after sick leave? Technically you can, but the CDC, your local health authority, and every nurse you've ever met is begging that you don't ask for a note because no one has time to write notes for people who are now well. So, however, this is another area where I think doctors' offices will probably learn some tricks that they maybe didn't have up their sleeve before, such as sending emails or possibly even calling on the phone. So be open to something other than a traditional written signed note. You may be able to say, hey, employee, can you please try to just get a really quick email or some kind of release? Electronically is fine. You can try to get that. If they can't, I would still try to be reasonable about them returning. And again, remember, you can ask about symptoms. You can check temperatures. So, not all is lost on this. sorry, I skipped ahead one there. So can we ask about symptoms if employees are out sick and we don't know why? Yes. Sort of the same rules as when employees are coming to work in the morning. Keep it specific to COVID-19. So we don't want to say, why are you home sick? Because they might say, I've got XYZ disease, and now we know about a disability we didn't want to know about, or something that really wasn't our business. However, you can say, are you home because you have symptoms of COVID-19, such as, and then list the 5 or 10 things. That is certainly not unreasonable and would be wise. If someone's called out sick and hasn't told you why, try to determine if it's because they're out with something that seems contagious, but don't be open-ended about it. Can we make an employee with a sick family member stay home? Yes, and you should. So if the family member is showing symptoms of COVID-19 or has been, confirmed to have a case of COVID-19, then yeah, anybody who lives with them should also be self-quarantining or self-isolating. There are technically 3 risk levels, low, medium, and high, that are defined by the CDC. And in theory, somebody who lives with somebody with COVID-19 could be in the low risk area and not need to be quarantined, but that's exceedingly unlikely. Humans behaving like humans are going to be in the medium to high risk category. So definitely feel free to have those people stay home. What about employees who don't want to come in? Can we make them? Yes, generally. So if they don't have any legitimate reason to believe they're in danger coming to work, then we can enforce our attendance policies. However, if you're in an area with significant community transmission happening right now, or you've had several people at work be diagnosed and go home, then it's going to be harder to prove that they weren't facing a threat at work. Also, if they are in a high-risk group or they live with someone in a high-risk group, I would say that they need to be granted an accommodation. They absolutely do need to be granted an accommodation under the ADA if they personally are in a high-risk group. If they live with someone who's in a high-risk group, I don't know about the legality of it, but if I were you, I certainly would do it, because you don't want to ultimately feel responsible for having, killed one of their close relatives by making them come into work in a dangerous situation. However, if there's, really no identifiable risk, then yes, you can enforce your attendance policies. What about employees with what I'm calling an nth degree of separation? So they know someone who knows someone who knows someone who has COVID-19. A full 2, maybe even 3 weeks ago now, we got a question about an employee whose roommate was quarantined because the roommate's boss was quarantined because the roommate's boss might have come into contact with someone who had COVID-19. That is probably a little too far out to be worried about. And in fact, not to be worried about, because we should all be worried to a degree, right? But I suspect most of us in the United States have had that degree of contact with COVID-19 at this point. We're probably all only 4 degrees away from it. That's not me being scientific or anything. Don't quote me on that. But those are sort of my feelings from having read so many articles, into the middle of the night and first thing in the morning. Can you still send those people home if you want to? Legally, yes. As an employer, you can send someone home for pretty much no reason at all, as long as it's not discriminatory. In this case, it wouldn't be discriminatory because you're concerned about infection in the workplace. That said, if you send somebody home and they can't work from home, so they can't make any income, they're probably going to sit around mad at you and try to figure out how to get you back with a discrimination claim or a wage and hour claim or something else in the future. Granted, if you send somebody home for whatever reason, they can apply for unemployment insurance. We're going to keep coming back to that. If people aren't getting full hours where they're not getting any hours at all, they can apply for unemployment insurance. There is a safety net. However, it's time consuming, it's complicated. The UI systems are massively overburdened right now. I do believe people will get paid. I just, that's complicated. So if we can let them work, we should let them work. Certainly if they can work from home, then let them work from home if you don't want them in the office. So since we are either sending people home or encouraging people to work from home, we should have a work from home policy. And if you haven't done this before, then this may be totally foreign. So here are my sort of like top 5 things to have in a work from home policy. Hours of work. So do you want them just working their normal hours? Would you prefer that they worked a little earlier or a little later? I mean, you can have some flexibility here now. Make sure you communicate your expectations regarding reachability. So do you need them to be on Slack or Skype or AIM Instant Messenger? How do you want them to be contactable during the day? Make sure you spell that out. You should also outline expectations regarding productivity. Maybe you want them to attend, every single meeting they would have otherwise attended by video conference. Maybe you expect them to do exactly as much work as they were doing in the office. That's fine. Communicate it. However, do be aware that if working from home is sort of new to your organization, people might need an adjustment period. They might not be at 100% for a little while. However, you might also discover that your people work better from home. I personally get more done at home because I am totally incapable of blocking out other people's conversations. So working from home while lonely actually works really well for me. And you may discover that you have employees like that. And ultimately this will be, a great discovery and will increase productivity. So be open to that possibility that people working from home could actually work out really well. Also write in anything you want to enforce about check-ins. So if you want managers checking on their subordinates or people calling into their managers once a day, 5 times a day, once a week, get that in there. And then finally, make sure you cover office expenses and how those should be dealt with. So a couple of states require that anything related to business be covered. Particularly California and Illinois have pretty strict laws like that. So you want to make sure people don't run home, and this really applies in any state, and buy a whole bunch of stuff and then try to expense it. Because even if at the end of the day you don't approve the expense, you still have to fight with them about it. So we don't want people buying the $500 ergonomic chair or $1,500 ergonomic chair or the big monitor or whatever, at least not without our approval. So, when I was drafting a fresh work from home policy, what I put in there was employees can spend in aggregate up to $40. After that, they need management pre-approval. So they still need to, submit receipts and stuff for that first $40 for whatever it may be. But beyond that, we want management to say it's okay first. So that's just one example. You can deal with that however you want. A couple of reminders about pay. If we are sending people home to work or we're sending people home to not work, possibly partway through a day. Non-exempt employees, these are people who are paid by the hour and are entitled to overtime once they've exceeded 40 hours in a work week. They need to be paid for all hours worked, even at home. There is something called the de minimis rule, though. That means if they do such a small amount of work that it wouldn't really make sense to log it, it wouldn't be practical to log or pay them for it, that we don't need to cover it. So for instance, if you send employees home and you say, every morning we'll send you a text message saying whether you should come in or not. And so you send that text message and it says, don't come in, don't come in. Them picking up their phone, looking at that, that's going to be de minimis. That's half a second to see that they don't need to come in. However, if you send an email every morning that's several paragraphs long and you expect them to reply and tell you certain things or check in on certain clients or whatever, and it's 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, 10 minutes over there, that definitely needs to be tracked and paid. For non-exempt employees, also, if you send them home midway through the day, it's possible you're going to owe them something called reporting time pay. That applies in 11 or 12 states. And what it says is that if an employee comes to work and you send them home early, you have to pay for part or all of their shift, depending on how long the shift was. There are a number of exceptions to this rule that may kick in the course of a pandemic. However, California appears to not be granting any exceptions at all. So if you're in California and you send somebody home partway through the day and they're an hourly or non-exempt employee, do check on reporting time pay to make sure they get paid correctly. For exempt employees, pay gets a little more complicated. So exempt employees are salaried, and they're usually managers, executives, administrators, professionals, doctors, lawyers, scientists, etc. This could also be your outside sales employees, and a number of computer workers apply or qualify for this exemption as well. So we're talking about those white-collar exempt employees. We can't take a partial day deduction for these people. So if they leave partway through the day, either because they want to, or because we told them to, or because they started feeling sick, they get paid for the whole day no matter what. If they have some paid time off accrued, you can fill in with that. But if they don't have any paid time off accrued, we still pay them for the full day. As a general rule, if they do any work during a work week, they're entitled to their full weekly salary. So let's say we furlough the whole company for an entire work week, midnight Sunday through the next midnight Sunday, the whole 168 hours there. If we have an exempt employee at home who does like 15 minutes of work, they are due their salary for that entire week. So if we're sending exempt employees home to be furloughed, we need to be incredibly clear that they should do no work at all. There are a couple exceptions where we can take a deduction if an employee misses a full day of work for personal reasons. We could take a deduction. Personal reasons, though, is not a business reason. It's not because you ran out of work for them. It's not because they were sick. It's not because the governor closed you. Personal reasons is like they wanted to go home and it was for the full day and they did no other work that day. The other exception is for a full missed day if the employee was actually sick, did no work, and you offer a bona fide sick leave plan. A bona fide sick leave plan provides at least 5 paid days per year for employees to use for sickness. So if you've got a paid time off program that offers 5 or 10 days a year that employees can use for anything they want, that's a bona fide sick leave plan. So if an employee misses a full day for sickness, you could take a deduction. If you don't offer at least 5 paid days, then you don't have a bona fide plan, and you can't take a deduction when an exempt employee is sick, even for a full day. All right, let's talk about what everybody really wants to talk about, which is the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So first up, I want to explain that there are still many, many things, in fact, most things that we don't know about how this law will function. I'm going to go over the highlights here, but there's a lot to be filled in. So how a bill becomes a law in like 15 seconds is that Congress writes laws and then they hand the laws off to agencies like the Department of Labor or Health and Human Services to write the regs, the regulations. That usually takes like a year. Right now, Congress has passed off this 100-page law to the agencies and given them 2 weeks to write the regulations. So they are frantically filling in the blanks about how these things are going to work. So first up, let's talk about the payroll tax credit. I unfortunately don't have a slide for you right now, but I will put a slide into the deck that we send you. We don't have very much information right now, but what we do know is good news, and we all just need to hang on for a little more detail. So the government is going to be giving you dollar for dollar all of the money that you spend on employees under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, okay? So it's got a little bit of an FMLA expansion in it for childcare. I've got several slides on that. We also have a paid sick leave section, or emergency paid sick leave. I've got some slides on that. The cost of providing these will be paid back to you 100% in full. And in fact, most of it you can sort of pay yourself back instantly, because when you need to pay your payroll taxes, you know, your Social Security taxes for employees, you can just take the amount you've spent on the FFCRA leaves right off the top. So if you've spent $8,000 giving employees leaves, emergency paid sick leave, and you're looking at a $10,000 payroll tax bill, you can just take $8,000 right off the top, and you're only going to owe $2,000 on that. If you have spent more than what you owe, you'll get a refund. And the government has said that they're going to come up with a simple way for you to apply to get paid back for the excess, and that they are going to respond to those as soon as possible. There will be a lot more guidance on how all of this works this week. The IRS and the DOL released a statement Friday night. So, you know, we've been assembling information on that, but we still know very little. They put this stuff out Friday night because they knew employers were losing their minds, because they didn't know how they were going to pay for this. So basically, help is on the way. Hang tight. There's going to be a lot more guidance this week. Basically, you know, keep watching your news sources. Okay, so let's talk specifically about what these expansions are. So the FMLA expansion applies to all employers with fewer than 500 employees, even those under 50. So yes, this is even for small employers. Who can use it is all employees who've been employed for at least 30 days. Healthcare providers and emergency responders may not be entitled to this benefit, okay? We're waiting for fuller definitions of what those two things mean. One definition I saw for healthcare providers that I think may be in the act is licensed doctors and osteopaths. It didn't appear to include nurses, which struck me as strange. So I think we might be getting a new definition for healthcare providers. We don't have one yet for emergency responders. So that's another thing we're waiting on. Also, we think there will be exemptions for certain employers with fewer than 50 employees if it would jeopardize the company as a whole. So if paying out for this FMLA expansion would put you under, you can apply for an exemption. We don't know how that works yet, but they said there will be a simple and clear form for employers to fill out. So hang on for that simple and clear form. I think we're going to see it this week. The only thing that this FMLA expansion does is provide that someone who needs to care for a child under 18, if their school is closed, could do so. And it only applies if they can't work from home, okay? So they only get the benefit and the pay here if they can't work from home. If they can work from home, you can expect them to work from home and then pay them like you usually would pay them. If they can't, though, maybe you're, you know, a manufacturing outfit or a restaurant and there is no work from home option, and this person has a child that's out of school that they have to take care of, then they will receive up to 12 weeks of leave to take care of that child. They won't get paid for the first 10 days through the FMLA expansion, but they'll probably get paid through the emergency sick leave that we're going to talk about in a minute. After that first 10 days, they'll get paid at 2/3 their regular rate of pay for the number of hours they would usually be scheduled to work, but only up to $200 a day. So if you've got somebody who usually makes, you know, $500 a day, they're only going to get 200 of that, even though 2/3 would be greater than 200. So everybody's capped at 200 a day for this. And again, I know $10,000 total sounds like an insane amount of money, but you're going to get this back either immediately off your tax bill or as a really quick turnaround refund. Job restoration will be required. So if somebody takes this leave because they need it, they have to be given their job back at the end. You can't sort of punish them for having used the leave and not give them their job back. However, if you're under 25 employees and the job no longer exists because maybe you've laid off half your workforce, you are an exception to that rule. However, you need to make reasonable efforts to find an equivalent position for them. And you need to basically promise that you'll call them back within a year if that job becomes available again. So we can't obviously prove that we're going to call them back, but it's sort of a good faith requirement of the law that you're going to call them back if a job becomes available. All right, let's talk about the emergency paid sick leave portion of the bill. So this once again applies to all private employers with fewer than 500 employees. And it's for all employees, this time no matter how long they've been employed. So there's no 30-day requirement on the emergency paid sick leave. So if you hired them last week, they're going to get this. If they qualify, if they have a reason to use it. And once again, we think there's going to be an exclusion for healthcare providers and emergency responders, but we don't have those exact definitions yet. And the Secretary of Labor might issue regulations, or not might, but will issue regulations to exempt certain employers under 50 from the child care provision of this if it would jeopardize, their livelihood as a business. So once again, we're waiting for guidance. We don't know how that will work, but they said it would be fairly simple. So hang on for that simple guidance from the government on how to apply for an exemption. However, it's only for the child care portion. So let's look at the other uses of emergency paid sick leave. Well, first up, if someone is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order. We don't think this is going to apply to shelter in place that is causing cities and states to close down entirely, aside from essential services, okay? So the way quarantine and isolation are defined is related to sickness. So someone who has been quarantined, I think I'm gonna get these right. Okay, one or the other. One of them means you are in fact sick, and the other one means you've been exposed to someone sick. Either way, you've been told to stay home. So if the CDC or the local health department tells you to stay home, that's number one. Number two is when a doctor tells an employee to stay home and self-quarantine. Maybe they have it, maybe they just have symptoms, maybe they came in contact with somebody, but if just a plain old regular doctor tells them to stay home, that's number two. Number three is if they're looking for medical diagnosis for symptoms of COVID-19, we need to give them time to go to the doctor and do that. We're also going to provide this emergency paid sick leave to care for someone who has the symptoms or is quarantined or isolated, so number one or number two. To care for a child who's out of school, although there might be an exemption for that one, or when experiencing substantially similar conditions. We have no idea what this means yet. This is another area where we're going to be waiting for guidance this week. That's just obviously very, very vague. We don't know what that means yet. Number 4, 5, and 6, employees will only get 2/3 pay. So basically, if you're caring for someone else, you don't get full pay. Under the law, full-time employees will get 80 hours. So 2/3 pay for 4, 5, and 6, like I just mentioned, and part-time employees will get the number of hours they usually work on average over a 2-week period. So if they usually work exactly half-time, they're 20-hour-a-week employees, they're going to get 40 hours under the emergency paid sick leave law. There's a cap of $511 a day for those personal uses 1, 2, and 3, and there's the same $200 a day cap as the FMLA expansion for uses 4, 5, and 6. A lot of people are asking how this interacts if they already offer paid leave, and basically if they can get refunded for having offered their own paid leave. We don't know yet. We really don't. Like, it wasn't written into the law. The law was very short. It was drafted very fast. Like I said, step 2, which usually takes months to years, is writing the regulations, but they will be writing them in the next 2 weeks. So very soon we will find out how this interacts with employer paid leave. The one thing the law does say is that, at least once it takes effect on April 2nd, that employers cannot force employees to use other accrued leave first. So if on April 3rd, an employee comes to you and says, you know, my husband was just diagnosed with COVID-19. I need to both take care of him and self-isolate. I'm going home for 2 weeks or the foreseeable future. You can't say, all right, well, you have to use up your PTO bank first. That person would have immediate access to this emergency paid sick leave. But again, you'll get your money back at the end of the day. Beyond that much information, we really don't know how this is going to play out with leave you already offered. One other question we're getting is, like, if I've already offered leave prior to April 2nd, can I like apply for a refund? Don't think that's going to happen. We don't see any retroactivity in the law, and it doesn't take effect until April 2nd. Okay, the last sort of section on here is on reducing hours or closing entirely. We know there are a lot of questions around that right now. Let's talk about reducing hours or pay. First up, for non-exempt employees. So once again, these are our hourly workers who are entitled to overtime if they do more than 40 hours in a work week. So they don't need to be paid unless they're actually working, unless, of course, we've got reporting time pay, but that's only going to be a little bit, like a couple hours. And that's only if we send them home partway through a day. So if you've got non-exempt employees who usually get like 35 hours a week, you're perfectly welcome to tell them you only have 30 hours or 15 hours or 8 hours. They're not sort of entitled to full-time work unless, of course, they've got some other kind of contract or collective bargaining agreement. So if you need to reduce hours for a non-exempt employee, you can just go right ahead and do that. You can also reduce their hourly wage. You know, I remember in 2008, I worked for a architecture and engineering firm, and you know, obviously that was the Great Recession or whatever we're calling it these days, and everyone in the company took a 20% pay cut. The CEO stopped paying himself. Everybody else took a massive pay cut, and we all shared the pain together to sort of try and delay layoffs, which ultimately there were lots and lots of layoffs as well. But we did what we could while we could to try to save people. So yes, you can reduce hourly wages. Do tell employees when you're going to do that, though. They basically need the opportunity legally to say, I don't like that new wage, I'm not going to work at all. So you wouldn't want to say, oh, hey, as of 2 weeks ago, I reduced your pay. Your paycheck's going to be different. We need to tell them at least before we change that rate. We also want to make sure that we're not doing it retroactively. So let's say you've got a pay period that's the 1st through the 15th, and you want to change their wages on the 10th. So you tell them on the 9th, hey, starting tomorrow, you're going to be at a lower wage. Make sure that when you do payroll next, that you haven't sort of like clawed back and reduced their pay for the entire payroll period. You would need to pay them their regular wages through the 9th, and then you could give them the reduced rate starting on the 10th. So you might need to split your payroll period, basically. Also, we can't have employees working for less than minimum wage. I know that sounds really obvious, but when I was practicing employment law and did a lot of wage and hour, I certainly had at least one of those where someone had agreed I think even in writing, to work for less than minimum wage and to not get overtime, and that's not allowable. The government does not care if somebody signs in blood that they are willing to work for less than minimum wage. That is not a right that they can waive. So if you make that deal with employees right now, they're perfectly free to sue you once this all blows over and they've got time. So I would not recommend making deals with employees to work for less than minimum wage. We can also reduce salaries for exempt employees. So you can implement a pay cut, whether it's for everybody or for certain departments. I'll say to check for unintentional discrimination. So, if you've got an all-male sales team and an all-female administrative team, and the sales guys get to keep 100% of their income under the circumstances, but the admin team, you decide that they're less likely to complain about a pay cut, so you give them a pay cut. We've got some issues there that may come back to bite you pretty hard. If the sales guys are doing the same amount of work and the admin team's doing a lot less work, then that's going to make sense. We've got a non-discriminatory reason. Just make sure you document the reason that you did those things differently. For exempt employees, you can reduce your hours expectation along with their pay, or you can just reduce pay. So, we don't pay these people by the hour, but often we expect our exempt employees to do like at least 40 hours a week, right? So if you're like, well, business has slowed down significantly, I really only expect 30 hours from you right now, so I'm going to also give you a 25% pay cut, that's going to make sense, right? That's going to sort of feel fair to everyone. If, however, you still need them to work 40 hours, but you need the 25% pay cut also, that's allowable as long as they remain above the federal minimum salary or the state minimum salary for exempt employees. So federally, that number is $684. It went up on January 1st. We can't prorate this. So if we've got an exempt employee currently making $800 a week and we want to cut their hours in half, and so we're going to cut their salary in half, we can't. We can't say, oh, we're going to give you $400 a week now and keep you exempt. That doesn't work. There's no prorating here. So the absolute floor for an exempt employee is $684 a week, or whatever your state might say it is. A small handful of states have a number that's a little bit higher than federal, but California and New York both have minimums that are way higher than federal, in the $1,000 range, depending on your size or your location. So if you're in California and New York and you're cutting exempt employee pay, keep in mind that you need to stay above those fairly high minimums. If you want to keep those exempt employees working for you, but you really don't have enough work for them, or you can't afford to pay them that minimum federal or state salary, then you can reclassify them. Generally, you don't want to bounce back and forth. If you make someone exempt this week, non-exempt the next, exempt the week after that, non-exempt the week after that, that's not going to fly. That's going to get you in a whole lot of trouble with the Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division, because clearly you'll be doing that to avoid, the requirements of the Fair Labor Standards Act in terms of paying your exempt employees. However, the way employers are doing this right now is pretty long-term. It's indefinite. We need to reduce your pay. We have no idea when things will improve. Hopefully it's 4 to 6 weeks, but it might be 6 months or a year. So, as long as you're not doing this on a short-term basis, I would say, less than a month, I wouldn't reclassify. But if you think it's going to be longer than that, you're probably pretty safe to reclassify your exempt employees as non-exempt. Do make sure, though, once again, that you're not doing this partway through a pay period. You can do it partway through a pay period. Just make sure you don't reach back and change their salary for the whole pay period, or their exemption status for the whole pay period. Just make sure you're splitting the pay period if necessary. So employers are looking at their options under the circumstances and with the significant reduction in business. And I just figured we'd define some terms here. Furlough, temporary layoff versus permanent layoff. So a furlough generally refers to a temporary reduction in hours of work or weeks of work. So that could be, hey, we're furloughing everybody by only giving you 10 hours a week of work because that's all we've got. Or, you know, the governor just shut the state down for the next 6 weeks. So we'll see you 6 weeks from now. That could be a furlough. That person's still on the payroll, they're still an employee, and you've communicated that to them, right? So, hey, we're still in this together. This isn't a full layoff. We'll bring you back as soon as we can. Maybe it'll be 2 weeks. Maybe it'll be tomorrow. Maybe we'll figure out something for you to do from home next week, or we'll come up with some projects or whatever. All of that sort of falls into furlough territory. A temporary layoff is when we're letting them go entirely. We're removing them from the payroll system, and we're hoping to bring them back within 6 months. That's sort of a standard rule for a temporary layoff. That rule comes from WARN, which is this federal law that says if you're going to do a mass layoff and you have more than 100 employees, that you have to give them a certain amount of notice. So WARN says that if it's less than 6 months, you don't have to give notice because it's just temporary and they're probably going to get their job back. So we don't need to jump through all these hoops. So we just sort of go with the WARN rule. Also, just a side note on WARN there, if you're like, wait, what's this WARN? It sounds like it applies to me. There are almost certainly going to be caveats for what's happening right now under WARN. Like WARN basically has an exception if it's due to unforeseen business circumstances. I think act of God might even be in there. It might not, don't quote me on that. But basically, you'll probably have a way around the WARN notice period under the circumstances. But if WARN does apply to you and you think you're going to be doing a mass layoff, you should probably talk to an attorney just to double check and make sure you're meeting requirements there. Especially since states often have their own sort of like mini WARN laws that you should be aware of. And then a permanent layoff is a layoff with no anticipated rehire date. That's just your sort of run-of-the-mill termination. What's important for everybody to remember is that during a furlough, employees are going to be eligible for unemployment insurance, all right? So even if you don't have to lay them off entirely. You don't have to terminate an employee for them to get unemployment insurance. Employees who have just reduced hours can apply and receive unemployment insurance. So send them that direction as soon as possible. You really need to be using the state website for the unemployment department, or often they call themselves the employment department, to keep track of these things. They're changing the rules constantly right now. So many states are getting rid of the waiting week for unemployment. A lot of them, I think, are waiving work search requirements. I suspect all sorts of other sort of hoops are being removed at this point in time, and they're trying to expedite that process because really nobody wants the entire economy to go under. If you're going to furlough, communicate that in writing and share any options that employees may have for using paid leave if they've got it, like if they have a sick leave bank that you want to let them use, or a PTO bank. Even if the furlough is anticipated to be fairly long, if they're able to like use up what little, paid time off they have, let them know that you'll be providing that option. Health insurance will be a little dicey in the face of furloughs. A lot of plans have eligibility requirements, such as working 30 hours per week, or, some probably have lower limits than that, but some kind of requirements about how much somebody has to work in order to qualify. So you'll need to check with your broker, or, read your plan yourself and see what it says about that. Because we're laying people off or furloughing, and they're going to lose eligibility, we need to give them information about COBRA. So there's federal COBRA and then there's state mini COBRA. Almost certainly one of those will apply to your employees. Under the FFCRA, it looks like health benefit premiums will also be allowed for that tax credit. That came out in sort of the Friday guidance. So we'll hear more about that this week as well. But it sounds like basically everybody's trying to figure out how we can keep furloughed employees on their health insurance plan and get that paid for, and not have you, the employer, bear the full cost of that. So keep your eyes out. We do think there will be solutions around health insurance, because obviously millions of people losing their health insurance in the middle of a health crisis would be pretty awful. So I think we're all sort of collectively trying to avoid that particular problem. Okay, what if you can't make payroll? This is a question that unfortunately we've already gotten a number of times. You really need to call an attorney if you think you're about to not be able to pay people. What kind of workers you have, how much money they make, what state you operate in, all of this will impact your liability and basically how much trouble you're in, if any, for not being able to pay people on payday. I wish there was a straight answer for this, or like a best practice for what to do when you can't make payroll, but really this is perhaps the one time in this entire presentation where I'll say that you really need to speak with an attorney. And then finally, a couple more glimmers of hope, or maybe the first glimmer of hope. The Small Business Administration is already working rather furiously to get disaster loan programs up and running out there. I put a link right there. You can't click it while you're watching this, but you can certainly type it in the tab next door. And again, we will send a copy of this presentation so you can reference that again later as well. In addition to these loans, which I know loans are not ideal, of course, it sounds like the $1 trillion deal that's being drafted right now by Congress will probably have some significant relief for small businesses. So stay tuned for that one as well. Hopefully we will see some hopeful legislation in the next day or two.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Kara. We really appreciate that. Our hope here, we've seen these questions. We've got a few hundred questions that came in. Our hope is that the content addressed as many of those as possible. It was really hard to get to these individually. We will be sending a recording. We will be sending the slides from today's presentation. And another thing we're doing is we're going to compile all of the questions. We're going to put those into an asset, and we will make that available in the coming days. We'll also be holding future webinars as there are more updates to this. So keep an eye out for that. We'll make sure that the invitations get to you. Again, we really appreciate your participation today. Thank you so much. We hope this was helpful, and keep an eye out for more webinars. Thank you. Have a great day.